Hey, hello everybody. Great to be with you. Happy Thursday. I'm so excited for the second episode. Can you believe it? Of Relationship Matters. I can't wait till we say the 100th episode of Relationship Matters. But hey, I'm going to introduce to you Barri Harris in just a few moments. But I just want to, because it's new, I want to just tell you what it's all about. Here's what it's all about. I believe that everything in life flows from relationship. And so relationships are the most critical and important part of our lives that require maybe the best investment, that are worthy of our time. You know, sometimes we can get lazy in our relationships. We can not think about, how we're relating to somebody. And so I thought it was important, after writing the book called Relationship Matters, that it was important to create a venue that we could have discussions around it and talk about even some of the principles that I wrote in the book with other people, other experts, other people that I respect and that maybe have a little different view or bring in another layer of texture to what I wrote about. And so that's what this is all about, is just having conversations about relationships and how to have healthy ones. Because I know that healthy relationships are so important. I've often said relationships can be your greatest joy or your greatest pain, depending on how they're going. And so we want to make sure yours are joyous, and that's why we are doing this. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Barri Harris. Barri is becoming a great friend of mine and a cohort. We're looking at intersections of working together, but I want to read you her bio so that I represent her well. And so here it is. Barri Harris has spent the last 20 years transforming the ways people work. So today we're going to be looking at the workplace a little bit more. As she progresses in her career as a manager, director, CFO, and a consultant to major US and Canadian corporations, Barri has had a ringside seat to a lot of toxic workplace behavior and has come face to face with her own toxic tendencies. That's the problem, isn't it, Barri? We come to our end of ourselves. On the positive, she's also worked with some great managers and teams that have accomplished extraordinary things together. And Barri knows firsthand how hard it is for managers to get the kind of practical training and coaching that could change the game for them and to get better results and build teams that are truly thriving. I love that. She's launched the Eureka Project to make sure that all managers have access to the best practical practices of exceptional managers and can show up authentically at their best self at work and achieve meaningful results. Wow, what a bio.
That's Barri, a mouthful.
Welcome. But it's so true. How many times have I walked into a place of business and you can feel the toxicity? You can actually feel the tension. You could cut it with a knife, and it's so unnecessary. And yet in our world today, and in the corporate world in particular, a lot of times that's a real problem, and people are the more important thing is people are being hurt by this. But first, before we jump into this conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I am a Kelowna resident for the last 5 years, moved from the Lower Mainland to change our lifestyle and get out to the outdoors a little bit more. I am the mom of 2 teenage boys, 17 and 13. So my life is busy. Yes, my older son has his license, so that's brought with it all sorts of new communication.
Yeah.
Yes. And married for 25 years to my husband, Steve, a wonderfully patient man who is really the glue that keeps our family operating.
Yeah, for sure. So today, what we're going to do is Barri and I are going to have a conversation around communication, and particularly communication workplace. But I want you to be able to adapt this to any setting. Like she just said, she's married 25 years, has 2 wonderful boys. And so the principles, I'm sure you found, Barri, that you've learned in terms of communication, in terms of creating a healthy culture rather than a toxic one, are all adaptable. I think anybody listening to any of the things we're going to talk about today can adapt them to work or home.
Yeah, I think that's very true, Mark. For me, what I've really come to realize is relationships at work or at home, it's connecting with another person. It's connecting with people. That is, that experience transcends the location. And quite frankly, with the, we often refer to our work wife or work husband. We spend so much time with our colleagues at work that those relationships can really impact how our life is at home, and vice versa. When you're having issues at home, it can dramatically impact how you're feeling at work. For most of my career, I would say to people, there are 2 Barris, the home Barri and the work Barri. And the work one is a much better one. She has her act together. She's very determined. She can do all sorts of things. The home one's a bit of a disaster. But the truth is, I'm just me, and learning to bring the real me, the authentic me, which is really all of me, to both places.
Yeah, it's so true when you say, what's happening at home can impact your workplace and vice versa, because our bodies weren't designed to contain stress, so they got to come out. It's got to come out somewhere, and often it comes out at the most inconvenient time with the wrong people, the ones we don't even want it to come out on. And so it does impact each other. So I've always found, they tell me that in marketing world, they tell me I should really know who I'm selling to, but I can't narrow it down to just couples or just families, because we're holistic people. It affects every area of our life when our relationships aren't healthy. And so, hey, listen, we want to invite anybody watching. I know that you may watch this later, but you're free, whether you're watching it live or later, to make comments and maybe ask questions right on whatever. If you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Relationship Matters Facebook page, doesn't matter. Just write your questions in. It pops up in our studio here, and we'll be able to answer your questions, and we'll be able to include you in this conversation that way. So if you have comments or thoughts or additional thoughts, please be free to do that. So Barri, let's dive into this a little bit deeper. It's clear you have a passion, that you've had bad experiences from toxic environments and good ones from healthy ones. What is it? Talk to me about this toxicity. What creates a toxic environment?
Oh, well, great question, Mark. And I don't think there's any one thing. And there are what I refer to as kind of dinosaur practices in the workplace, right? Things that today's workplace is to some degree pretty unchanged from where we started in having any kind of worker and boss relationship, whether that's way back in England at the beginning of capitalism with the feudal lords, or in a workplace. There are lots of movies like Glengarry Glen Ross or Bad Bosses. I mean, you name it. We have lots and lots of fodder for how badly people can behave to other people in the name of getting results in the workplace. Yeah. So, for me, it became exciting when I realized things are really shifting. People are demanding more. We're no longer willing to just tacitly accept, oh, well, this is how it is, working for the man. I just gotta suck it up and play by these rules, which, by the way, only a very, very small select group of people actually get to climb up that ladder, and the rest of us feel exploited. And and so I got really burnt out at several times in my career. I was a workaholic. The more success I enjoyed at work, it sounded great when I explained it to someone at a cocktail party, but it really wasn't that sexy or exciting to slog through the day to day. And I really feel managers in particular are sandwiched, and so we're stuck between the trying to support the people that work for us, help them to deliver on what we need so that we can show the people around us, the higher ups, etc., that we're delivering those results, and we're doing it with fewer and fewer people in tighter timelines.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's a struggle for everyone, and it's no wonder that under that kind of stress, without training and coaching on how to do things differently, guess what? We're not as great as we think we are out there in the workforce.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think about, visually that squish, right? They're getting pressure from down up above, and they're getting pressure from down below. And I teach I taught an anger management class for years, and one of the styles of anger is the dump truck. And usually the dump truck style is when you feel powerless somewhere, then you dump the power onto someone, the blame onto someone else. So, your boss dumps on you, you dump on your kids dump on the pet, right? And so
that's the rolls downhill.
Yes, exactly. And it's just kind of interesting because I don't think, I think empathy is one of the pathways out of this, to empathize with somebody. Because if you think about that, that manager, it's easy to say, oh, they're just a jerk, or they're being mean, or they're, if you're working below them, but you don't understand the pressure they're feeling. I think maybe one of the answers to my question is, for toxicity, is to simply have more empathy and understand, and maybe seek understanding with each other, right?
I think that's very valuable. I think there's another element in there that is really intertwined with it, because I'll come back to this. There are moments where empathy alone isn't enough.
Right.
I can, I have folks on my teams who are people of color, people, people who just generally aren't fitting that tiny little mold we have of corporate culture of, what it is. And, and white folks were privileged. And, even as a white female, I can say, oh, I've had lots of challenges, but I can't even imagine the challenges that many others have had. So, I respect that completely. And I respect that I don't know what it feels like to walk in their shoes. I can, my heart can hurt for them, and I can try to appreciate it. But where I need to start for myself is even just being aware of my own biases, my own triggers, my own ways of filtering things, the way that I show up to others in the workplace. Because having that understanding of myself, and then the next piece of that is kind of tied into empathy, which is being able to shift my perspective and realize I'm thinking about something and it's hitting me in a certain way, but it's not, I can't assume that that's what the person on the other side is feeling or thinking or meant when they said something. So
communication then is our next step, which is what we want to talk about today. So it's not good enough just to be empathetic. You need to communicate. I call it empathetic communication. You need to actually, communicate. And I say in my book, communication's bi-directional. It's not just one way. And so it's about active listening, but it's also about finding your own voice and being able to be assertive, which is, making your needs known, but not rudely or aggressively,
Exactly.
right? So
yeah, it reminds me of a story. Very recently I was involved in a conversation with someone, and I felt like every time they asked me a question, they wanted to hear what I was saying, but not from the perspective of really understanding or appreciating where I'm coming from. They just wanted to know what I thought so that they could dismantle my
right,
argument to show why they were right.
right.
So we talk, these are the things that just crack me up. It's like somebody took an active listening class and they understand and they want to ask questions, but they missed the piece that was like, actually appreciate the person on the other side might bring you ideas or thoughts you had not previously considered, and that's a good thing.
Yes. Yeah, because you're not asking questions or trying to get understanding of the other person so you can use it against them. That's not actually true communication. That's manipulation.
Let me show you where your thinking
Yeah.
went wrong.
Right,
Mine
right.
the right way.
It's more about, hey, am I open to learn? And the other thing is, at the end of the day, once I've heard you, I might disagree, but can we not disagree and still get along? Can we not disagree on a point and not tear each other's character down or their personhood? And I think that's so important as well.
Yeah, agree to disagree on an issue, but not have that be how you feel about the person. And we talk about that all the time now, politics and so many things in the world. There's so many conversations now that we're afraid to have, especially at work, because people have very different opinions, and it's really, it's quite polarizing. Back in the day, my grandparents, one was a liberal and one was a conservative, and they would go at it, but it was always around policy and,
it was respectful.
It never became, if you believe that way, I can't like you anymore.
Right. So in this climate of today, Barri, like how can a manager, I think of managers in companies, but I also think of parents at home or whatever.
Yeah.
But how do we, what do they do? Have you thought that, like, in your Eureka training in the Eureka Project, is there kind of like a path or a pattern that a manager could take to ensure, sorry, just kicked my water bottle over, to make sure that they are creating a healthy culture and not a toxic one?
That is truly the quintessential question. It's a great one, Mark, and thank you for asking. I think to be able to have that kind of communication, to have a place where people can speak openly with different ideas and opinions, means you need to create an atmosphere of trust and psychological safety. And I know that last week you were talking about trust. It's really the starting point, right? If I don't feel safe to voice my thoughts, I'm not gonna put myself out there. So as a manager, how do you do that? Well, first you have to encourage people to do it. But then I think even what people are really going to hold back and say, like, I might not be an early adopter to sharing all my thoughts until I really feel like, okay, I'm getting there, or whatever. So you've got to be consistent, and you've got to really show by your reactions, by your responses, that you're going to be able to still, maintain that trust if you hear things that you don't like, that are in conflict with your thoughts or beliefs. And that's the hardest part. That's finding that moment of being able to hear something that maybe triggers something in you and not get set off, not just react back or push back, but to actually learn how to take that pause and regulate your reactions so that you can now respond. Now you're giving yourself that space to be curious, to be open, to really like want to understand from their perspective, what does this mean?
Yeah, I've often said that, people don't hear your angry voice. They'll only, and it's so important if you're going to have a difficult conversation, because, in terms of a manager, they've got to balance like what is required of them, what is policy in the organization, and what they're trying to get that person to achieve. And I think that, to what you said, if we have their best interest in mind, then we'll listen, because when somebody gets to speak and gets to, and they know they've been heard, whether you enact on it or not, you may not be allowed to. You might have to say, hey, our policies won't allow for that, but what a great idea. Thank you for your input. That person feels valued. And I think that's a key to the environment today. Money doesn't actually have value to it. You can give somebody a bonus or whatever, but when they feel like they're validated, when they feel like they're heard and they're cared about, I think that those are the best work environments, right? Those are the ones I want to be in, where people are wanting to empower me. So I think that's so important for the manager to realize, listen, you don't have to, put yourself at risk in terms of executing on policy, but you can still open up a conversation where your people have that freedom, that safety to come and bring a new idea.
Absolutely. And so how do you build trust? Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
People want to be seen and valued for bringing their authentic self and doing their best. They're trying hard, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things on our website, we have a giveaway, a freebie called Inspired Acknowledgement. And it's simple things that you can do every day to build that culture of recognition and acknowledgement. Now, I'm into the research all the time about what makes for high performing managers. How do you have high functioning teams? And repeatedly, the top things that folks are looking for from their manager is to feel acknowledged, to get feedback, not just on what needs to improve, but on what their strengths are, what they're doing well. And when you help someone see their strengths and how they can leverage those strengths, now they're really going to power up and do amazing things. And, coming back to our family discussion, that is the same way, that I am trying to have conversations with my kids. Maybe when they were little, it was more instructive, but, giving them the space to have their own thoughts and ideas, to be open to what they're saying, but then to really dig in to try and understand, okay, where are you coming from? Where, and it's like, instead of going, well, you're wrong, you don't know all these things. It's like, okay, from my vantage point, I have this other perspective. Have you considered this? How would this impact how you're thinking about these other things? Right.
Yeah, I always say asking questions. I always say asking questions de-escalates, making statements escalates. So
so true.
I like what you're saying there. So can you give us a few from that course that people can go on? It's Eureka.
The Eureka Project.ca.
.ca.
Yeah, Canada. The Eureka Project. So THEEUREKA project.ca. And if you subscribe to the site to get on our newsletter and stuff, you get a free gift, and it's Inspired Acknowledgement. So it's basically some specific ways that managers can start bringing acknowledgement into one-on-ones, team meetings, and using that information in a way that when you come to do that annual performance review, you have lots of great positive stuff to bring in, not just like the stuff that might have screwed up last month.
Right. Yeah. And so can you give us a couple of those acknowledgement, give the audience just a couple of acknowledgements that you could do this week that they could
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you want to, set yourself a goal for every single person on your team or every single person in your family, notice one thing that they did right and comment on it. And not just
Mm,
like, hey, thanks or great job, but be specific. Mark, I noticed that when you were in, our BS Thursdays networking this morning, you
yeah,
brought up a really powerful example and it resonated, with
right,
me. So again, I noticed,
yeah,
so I see you.
right.
And now I'm telling you specifically what I noticed and why I thought that was valuable.
That is so powerful. That that tip, folks, could actually revolutionize your relationships. Just that exercise could change the whole culture of your organization or your team. That's such a powerful. Whoops, what's going on here? Something came up that wasn't supposed to come up. That one was supposed to come up.
Also, Impact Society is also awesome.
They're also that was from last week. Sorry about that. And and so I just, I'm I'm blown away by that, the simplicity. I think, a lot of times we like to complicate things, but the simplicity of that I always say, see what's strong, not what's wrong in someone.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're doing. You're saying, "Hey, I saw this in you today. I saw you catch them doing good things." And they'll want to do more of those. Have you ever noticed, even with children, we always seem to catch them doing the wrong thing, and then what we do is we correct them, whatever. So the attention they get is they're always hearing what they're doing wrong. Well, guess what? They're going to do it again.
Yeah.
So you want to say what's strong. So in a team setting, a manager can just simply acknowledge what they're seeing, what is strong in somebody. It changes the culture of the organization.
Hmm. Yeah. You want to up your game on that one? Acknowledge them publicly in
Yeah,
front of teammates, or even better yet, acknowledge that someone on your team did great work specifically in a different meeting with higher ups,
yeah,
elevate their presence. That
yeah.
is called, sponsorship, but it really what that's called is connection. And,
So true.
so often as managers, the biggest, what's toxic, when you're so afraid that somebody on your team is going to get recognized for a great idea that you steal it, you steal the credit, you don't
Right,
say about all the great work that they put into it.
right,
That is a sign of you and your fear. You're coming from a place of fear or lack. If you want to be a great manager,
right.
the better your team does, that is a reflection on how great
Totally.
you're doing.
That's so true. Because a lot of times it's insecurity that drives that need for, and it does so much damage to an environment. That's what creates a toxic thing. When somebody does hard work and doesn't get recognized, but worse, gets it stolen. It just doesn't instill confidence in your team. And by the way, probably somebody's going to read right through it anyway. We all know it's BS, and so we just,
Mhm.
you don't actually even get the acknowledgement. I would much rather be acknowledged for the team, for the team performance, for having a great environment. That would be a greater reward for me than me getting individual accolades.
Yeah. I grew up with a dad who was not big on positive reinforcement.
Right.
So, is dad proud of me? Does dad think I'm doing okay? It was not, a question that myself or any of my three other siblings really like. We joke about that. Like,
Yeah.
my dad would never tell you you were doing anything wrong, but he would make that very clear because you had the stony wall of silence. But he also would never make it clear when you were doing something right. And I can
Right.
remember after graduate school, being at a family function, and one of my dad's closest friends coming to me and saying, your dad is so proud of you. He cannot stop talking
Mm,
about this thing that this great thing that you did. And, he was talking about it at the poker game and stuff. I was like, my dad? My dad said that? And it was awesome, and I appreciated it, and it opened my eyes that, okay,
Right.
but wouldn't it have been nice if he said it to me?
Yeah. Exactly. I think we need to find ways to acknowledge people, like you said, and celebrate them. It's one in my book,
Build
there's a
them up.
chapter on honor. And one of the
Mhm.
ways you honor people is by celebrating them and celebrating their effort and celebrating their victories. And so I agree. I think in communication, it's really healthy to be able to point out. I often say, if you're going to have a hard conversation, set the table. If you're going to have
Mhm.
a nice meal, you want to set the table for your guests. Well, you need to do the same thing in communication. You want to set the table for that hard conversation. And how you do that is you put the best china out first. So you want to be able to say
Deposit in
to
the
them,
trust bank.
yes, deposit into that trust bank and say, you're doing this, this, and this really well. And I've noticed, that you've improved on this area. But today I want to just talk to you about one other area that is kind of hindering people from seeing those good things, and contrast it.
Yeah.
You contrast it from their personhood. I would say contrast personhood from behavior. Like, so there's some things you're doing that is undermining that great stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I want to
Honestly,
help
that
you
was
do
so
that.
powerful in your book, Mark. That really spoke to my heart in your book.
Mhm.
You know, especially with teenagers and wanting to give them some space,
Yeah.
you can observe where they're just shooting themselves in the foot. And honestly, I feel that way at work as well. I have, folks on my
Yeah.
team who I love and adore. And sometimes I'm just like, oh, that was painful. Right.
Yeah.
So, how do you have that conversation in a way that is constructive?
Yeah.
That's,
And empowering.
that's huge. And the way that you position it in the book to really say, I know that you are great at this, but this thing that you're doing isn't reflecting who you
Right.
are. Like,
Exactly.
phenomenal. But you've
Yeah.
got to have built up through acknowledgement, through noticing, through really creating that authentic connection that I see the good in you. Because if you tried to say that and you hadn't already reinforced to them that all these great things that you see in them, they're going to think it's just lip service.
Right. Exactly. So tell us, Barry, what would you teach a manager to do in a case where, okay, I know of a situation right now where the upper management is telling the next level of management to take care of something because they have a conflict or they don't like something one of their reports is
Go do
doing.
my dirty work.
Go do my dirty work. What would you suggest for that? I mean, I think it's some of the same things we've been talking about, but is there a way that manager can honor the higher ups, but still, deal with what needs to be dealt with? And then how do they communicate that to the report, but also how do they then communicate it back up the chain? How do you lead up?
Oh,
That could
that's
be
a
a whole
lot
show.
to unpack, Mark, and a lot of it is situational.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
let's just say, and this one's happened to me. Leadership on my team, my leadership did not think someone on my team was a good fit.
Right.
Through whatever reasons, biases, person actually had not reflected themselves very well in a different meeting. It was very damaging to them. And there were some other factors that I thought were ridiculous, but whatever.
Right. What did you do?
Because I had built a relationship of trust, I was actually able to sit down with the person and have a very frank discussion and say, look, like, I'm getting this feedback. I'm observing these things. Again, I don't think this doesn't ring for me as you being your best self.
Right.
Are there things going on that I'm not seeing? Like, can you help me understand kind of how it's feeling from your perspective?
Right.
Creating an open space for them to share. They were able to actually share that in that particular meeting, something had triggered them, and it was triggering a pattern, we all have baggage. Let's be real. Like nobody's unscathed, right? Some people's baggage is quite heavy and they've had some really big challenges that they are overcoming as they move on in their life. But it doesn't mean that you don't get triggered by stuff and it brings up that emotion in the moment.
Sure.
So, because she felt safe with me, I said, I don't need to know the details, right? But it was enough for me to know, okay, it brought up some stuff that, and she was upset. And, I just was like asking instead of telling. What are your thoughts? Where do you want to go from here?
Right.
How can I help you be successful? Because my goal is to make you feel like you're doing your best and doing great work. And if you're doing that, I know we're going to get great results.
Right. Yeah. So then, so that's fantastic. Then how did you communicate that back up the line to say, I dealt with this? How did you do that?
Well, that one was interesting because the way they wanted me to deal with it was to put them on a performance improvement plan, and I didn't. Right. So I took my own risk and said, I've documented these things, I've put them down, we are working on a plan together, and I will be accountable to coach her through this. So awesome. From the leadership perspective, they were like, hey, your call, it's your throat to choke. And I felt, in this case, I felt strongly to have my person's back.
Awesome. And what was the result? How did it go?
She, it took a little while. It wasn't an overnight thing. But she actually used that as a catalyst for her to really grow professionally. And because she didn't get all shut down and whatever, she decided, and this is the thing, you can't tell what somebody else is going to do, but she decided to do the hard work on herself, to be able to understand what triggered her and how to operate at her best potential. Exactly. And I was there to bounce ideas off. And in fact, a lot of that is kind of what led to the Eureka Project. Is I just see how transformative it is when you've got someone in your corner that sees you for how great you can be.
Yeah. That's such a powerful story, Barri. Thank you for sharing it, because it's so practical that anybody listening can apply it right away. But it's also, it would also do something else that I just want to highlight. If that person that you did that for didn't change, and they didn't, they maybe even spiraled more, or they didn't evolve in a sense, you would have a clear conscience then to be able to put them and say, listen, we tried this, we did that, and you have refused to take the advice or whatever. You actually have good footing at that point to be able to take the next step. Even if that's dismissal, you're going to be able to do it because you gave them every opportunity at success. You valued them, you gave them the tools, you coached them, but they just outright refused. Mm-hmm. Then it will actually prove, that you made the right decision, because you're going to walk away with a clear conscience, knowing you did all you could for that person. And I remember one time I had a young man working for me. And I had to sit him down, and I did exactly the same thing. What I'm seeing you do, your behavior, is actually below your value. Mm-hmm. You're much better than this. And so I suspended him. I said, I can't have you active, because in that case, he was a youth mentor. So I didn't want him passing bad things on to the youth. Right. But I did believe in him, and I was able to just tell him, hey, you're going to have to sit out for a bit, and you're going to have to work on these things, and I will help you. I'll be there to coach. I'm not abandoning you. I'm there to help you, but that's what we need to do. He said years later, and he did turn it around, but he said years later that was a catalyst moment in his life, because he said, I never had a dad in my life that would do that with me. He just abandoned me, just gave up on me. And he said, the fact that I didn't like what I was hearing from you because it was calling me out, but you were there to stay. And he said that was a catalyst, and it turned things around for him. sometimes, if I let the fear or insecurity or the fear of conflict or, get in the way or just fired them outright, what message would I have sent? What would I have done for that individual as a
And
human?
I see that too often, right? Managers,
Yeah.
well, I'm busy. I don't have time to deal with this.
Right.
I'll just, put them on a PIP. But if you do that, you're basically sending the message, I'm looking to push you out, right?
Yeah.
Like, no matter how you say that, people will, no matter what you really think, the minute you bring that formal structure into bear, people go into defensive mode and
Right.
protection mode because
It's true.
it's very impactful for them, right? And it's bringing up all those protective emotions,
Right.
because
And
you're coming from a place of pain.
For sure. And I would also say that I know I've had people push back on me. Well, I just don't have the time. Listen, you will save yourself a ton of time if you take the time to invest in relationally into your team.
Yeah.
When you take that time to invest in them, their performance, their abilities are going to go up because they're going to work harder for you because you've taken that time, and you'll get more done. This idea that a manager doesn't have time is just it's an excuse. And
Yep.
and so if you take relational time, you'll get everything done that needs to get done. But there is a cost up front. Any investment has a cost up front.
Build a
You got to
solid
make
foundation, right?
you got to make the investment, or you're not going to get the return on investment. And so by continuing to say I don't have time and not investing in your team, what you're doing is actually making your job even harder, and you're making your job even less effective, and you're going to actually end up working more hours. It's not going to save you time. It's going to cost you time.
Yeah. And then you're constantly looking at, how do I use external incentives, rewards, bonuses,
Right.
whatever, to motivate people instead of building up that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, I'll just give them a spiff and that will be good enough, right? I remember the old sales days when I was in sales. It's like, well, I'll just give them a prize if they sell X amount. Those things were maybe partial motivation, but they never motivated me to do better.
And they're not consistent. You see a little blip and it goes right back down.
Yeah, that's interesting too, isn't it? Because then what I'm doing is I'm training people. The only time you're going to work hard for me is when I'm going to give you an incentive for it, rather than building the relational equity to be able to say, no, we're in this together. We're a team. We're going to be successful because it's who we are, not because we're trying to make more money.
Yeah. One of the things that we've kind of talked around it, I want to formalize this in the Eureka Project. We use a model called the TAP model, tap in. It's trust, accountability, and a sense of shared purpose. So trust, accountability, and purpose. Those are the three essential ingredients, basically, to build a high functioning team.
Yeah.
Now, those aren't things that you say, we're going to do all this stuff and we're going to have our project plan and we'll do all these things, and as we succeed, we're going to have all those things. Actually, you have to lay the foundation and invest in that foundation to then be able to reap the rewards, being all the high performing stuff. So you want to have people show up authentically. You need to build trust and psychological safety. You want to have people exceed, the statistics are unbelievable around purpose-driven companies. Now, you don't have to work for an organization that is a purpose-driven organization to find a sense of purpose and meaning in your work and use that as a shared purpose, a North Star for what matters most for your team's success. Now you have a shared vision of what success looks like. Each person contributes, makes their commitments, and holds themselves and each other accountable for what their role is in achieving those successes.
That's so good. I love it. That's awesome stuff. That is so practical and helpful. TAP, it's easy to remember. I put it in the comments just so people can get that one down. Trust, accountability, and purpose. I love it.
And it works. It's irrespective of industry, because when I work in a lot of technology organizations, and of course, there is also a pillar that will be industry or organization specific, right? Your business and technical acumen as it relates to your industry. But that's like one of 4, right? If you've got trust, accountability, shared purpose, and your business technical acumen, you have all the ingredients for exceptional results.
Well, the other thing I found with this tap concept, tap in, is this, that it actually cleans up a lot of communication. It actually helps you get very laser focused on what to communicate and what needs to be communicated when you know when that's in place. When you have trust, I know what I can say to people and what I can't. When you know, I always say true accountability is holding somebody accountable to what they say they want to achieve, or in this case, what the team says they want to achieve. And if you have that shared purpose, that shared idea of what success looks like, the accountability is easy because, hey, you helped design this shared purpose, and so you're accountable to fulfill your part. And now that empowers your team rather than having a top-down directive or email to everybody saying, now you're doing this. Imagine the difference in the power of implementation if they actually allow that to implement the other way, right?
Yeah. And we have executives coming in every 6 months and saying, okay, we have new OKRs, right? New objectives.
Yeah.
Now we're going to do this. Now we're over here. Now we're over there. We're like, what's my priority? I'm sensitive to the time. There's one thing I really want to make sure we cover, Mark.
Jump on it.
You spoke about it, I thought, really well in the book, and it's about miscommunication.
Yes.
Because just because I think I'm saying something clearly does not mean that you are hearing it.
It's so true.
The way my brain is thinking it, right? And we see that a lot in email because you can't, you're inferring tone in an email. You don't really know. But it's also something that I'm seeing and starting to really understand, that we make so many assumptions about what someone means when they say something.
So true.
And maybe it's just me, but I'm realizing, as good as I thought I was at reading people, and this happens on a regular basis with my husband. So, you would think after 25 years, we know each other pretty well. I misread his communication all the time, and vice versa, right? And it's because we're different personalities, we're different makeups. So we have different histories, so we filter what we hear differently.
True.
That comes back to that active listening. So when you hear somebody say something and it doesn't sit right, that pause gives you the chance to say, maybe I need to clarify that. And because when I hear that, it tells me this. Is that what you meant? And when I've been able to actually not climb up the walls to the ceiling, because I'm like, when I can actually take that deep breath, do my little tapping thing. I'm tapping, I'm not freaking out. It just inserts enough of a pause that I don't react and I can respond. And that's been so powerful because it clears up miscommunication immediately, instead of what I see so often, personally and professionally, is you assume that the other person meant something that they didn't mean. Now you have some resentment and you're building a brick in that wall between you. They don't even know.
Yeah. That's the thing. The tension's not spoken, it's felt.
Yeah. So, I encourage everyone that if someone says something and it hits you wrong and you feel hurt or angry or defensive, just take that pause and say, hey, that landed kind of wrong for me. Can you help me understand where you were coming from?
Yeah.
In that perspective.
Yeah. In the communication, it's the I language. I feel when I feel, and what I want. So I use the example of this. So I feel hurt when you yell at me. And when I feel hurt, I yell back, or I
Yeah.
wither, whatever.
At which point my husband says, I wasn't yelling at you.
Yeah. And so what I want is for us not, I want us to get along. So can we agree not to yell at each other or whatever, right? So,
Yeah.
but it's using that I language. Like, I think the clarifying questions is probably saved my bacon more than ever. Like, I want to understand your heart. So what did I need to ask for clarification? What did you mean when you said that? And because it gives them an opportunity also. And how many times have I assumed something that find out that that's not what they were thinking at all? And then it's like, wow, I had all this tension for like weeks when it wasn't even what you meant. Assumption's the enemy of faith.
And sometimes, I mean, there's so many examples of this, right? So I think each of us has to take responsibility to have the courage to, because it takes vulnerability to admit, I felt hurt. Hey, I that didn't land right for me. I felt I really, like, it got my back up. And at work, again, it's, if the person who's saying that is in a position of authority over you, it's even more highly charged, but that is where I think we see shifts happening in workplaces where people truly do want to build that trust and that authenticity.
Right.
Then, being able to say that and just calmly say, help me understand, I felt hurt. And then hearing from the other person. And quite frankly, sometimes the other person is ignorant, right? Like they have a viewpoint that you don't agree with, right? You might go, okay, I appreciate you explaining that. I think we might need to agree to disagree, or, I'm still,
or I think you've misunderstood me.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm not still totally comfortable. I'm going to need to take some time to, reflect on it or unpack it. If nothing else, you are establishing a boundary that it is not okay with you to be spoken to in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And boundaries protect relationships.
Yeah.
They don't hurt them.
If you don't feel safe to be able to say that, to say, I'm not comfortable. I hear what you're saying. I'm still not comfortable. I need to, we need to do we need to either pause this or whatever, give yourself some distance. I would say for folks who feel uncomfortable with that, again, it's that opportunity to do a little reflection of, why do you feel unsafe? And is this something that can be improved, either from your own self, knowing what your baggage, your traumas are, it gives you that chance to say, how do I want to handle this? And sometimes the answer is, I don't want to work here anymore. I don't want to work for this person anymore. But at least you're not doing it from an emotional place. You're doing it from a place where you've actually given yourself time to process.
Right. Last few minutes. And is there anything else you want to cover? I want to make sure that you get everything in that you want to give us, because you've given us so many nuggets today.
I feel like we could talk about this for just days. There's so many,
and you can come back on. I'll get you back
for us to improve.
Yeah, well, we can do this again. I'm happy to have you back on again, and we can talk further and go a little deeper and into other
better
things.
Communication is definitely evolution, not revolution, right? There are definitely some techniques, some best practices.
Yes.
And I would encourage people, and this is what we really focus on, is, practicing new ways of doing this, because when you first do it, you're going to feel tongue-tied. You're not going to find the right words. It's not going to feel comfortable because it's not your go-to behavior. Practicing it in a variety of situations in a safe place. Yeah. So whether that's, we have some awesome networking groups that give us that chance to really practice uncomfortable stuff. We at the Eureka Project weave that into all of our training because we really believe it's not just, knowing a bunch of stuff. It's about putting it into practice to really be your best self at work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. So good. It's practice, 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 right? It's experiencing it. It's not just hearing about it. You can hear a lot about something, but until you experience it and actually do it, and it is uncomfortable at first, that's okay. You could start in easy places where you have trust equity and just simply say, hey, I'm trying to learn to communicate more assertively. Can I practice with you? Can I just tell you something, and then just practice it and then get feedback and say, I'm trying to be a better communicator. And I'm sure that there'll be somebody in your life, in your circle, that will agree to do that with you. And if you don't have somebody, you can get a coach or,
Exactly.
and do it with a coach. And so, I know that most coaches are happy to do that and help you reframe some of the ways you're thinking and whatnot. I always say, change your mind, change your life. And so that can help. So Barri, we got kind of like 5 minutes here. One thing I was wondering is, and this might be a whole other show, but just touch on it quickly. In this new work at home reset, the great resignation, all of these things, communication, I think, has taken the biggest hit. Like you said, email is a terrible way to communicate. Texting is worse because you can't hear indentation, you can't hear purpose behind it. It's really only designed for a one-way transfer of information. It's not a true communication in that sense, that it's not bi-directional. What could a manager do in this distance, like virtual office? What's the best way to communicate with your team? Is it too obvious? Is that too obvious of a question? But maybe you got some thoughts that you can.
Well, I think, again, the research shows us that people thrive when they feel like they have a good relationship with their direct manager. So I would say, don't be afraid to over communicate informally. Some of the best things has just been, some of the best managers I've had have been the ones that just will randomly ping and go, hey, good morning. How's it going today?
Yeah.
I know you were working on this. How was your night?
Right.
Just simple stuff.
I always say this has two things in it that are important. It's actually a phone. I know that's a foreign concept, but it's actually a phone. You could pick up the phone and just call somebody and make a personal connection, see how they're doing. And the other thing is it's FaceTime. You could easily do what we're doing today and have a, whatever. I think that is the key to what you said there. It's like, just don't think that because you send them a Instagram that's communicating. Don't think because you message them it's a communication. I've had so many people tell me, I talk to them all the time. It's like, yeah, what format? So pick up the phone, call somebody, send a Zoom invitation out, whatever it is that you got to do to just make personal connection with your team members individually, not just always in a Zoom room. I think that's important as well.
And take that time to make small talk. Like really, see them as full humans, not just, resources.
And understand that is part of your job. So that is not extra time. That's not time you have to, manufacture somewhere. That is actually your job. And so if you can learn to see the importance of communication and how, and that acknowledgement we talked about today, seeking understanding their heart, when we do these things, we're going to remove the toxicity and we're going to create a healthy relational culture in our organizations.
Absolutely. And it's connection, right? Connection. Trust, it's authenticity. It is holding each other accountable to do great things together.
Yeah. They're no longer soft skills. They're essential skills. That's what I always say.
Absolutely.
Well, Barri, thank you so much. If you want to get a hold of Barri, I actually commented, so it's in the comments below. You can go to her website, the Eureka Project, and she has the free course on there that's going to give you some of the tools we talked about today. So you don't get too much for free in life. So go ahead and do it now before this project takes off, because then it's going to cost you lots of money. So go ahead and sign up for their newsletter, sign up on their website, and you'll get that free course. I took it, I signed up, and I'm going to be working on that course myself. And so I really encourage you to do that. Barri, thanks for being with me today. And
Thank you,
thanks
Mark.
for
It's
your
been a lot of
incredible
fun.
insight. Yeah, it's been so
Always
much
fun to talk with you.
Okay. All right, everybody. We're going to see you next week. Next week, I got Ron Schlitt on, and he is a Strength Finders guru. And so we're going to talk about communication from the point of view from a strength-based point. And it's going to be a great conversation. So I really encourage you to join us. Have a great week.